Welcome, everyone, to the first at the Capitol Legislative Policy Committee of the League of Cities and Towns. I am filling in for Mayor Kafusi, who is in a meeting in Washington, D.C. So this could be awesome or not awesome. It's dangerous if you let me be in charge of chairing a meeting. So we'll see how this goes and if she wants to rush back to take over this assignment for LPC. So welcome, everyone. It's great to see everyone back at the Capitol. We have a couple of things that we need to do. First thing we're going to do is actually adopt the minutes of January 2018 of 2023. Has anyone deeply pondered the minutes and would like to make a motion? I see Councilwoman Fowler from Salt Lake who would like to adopt the minutes. And we had a second from Mill Creek. So we have a motion, a second. All in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye. Any opposed? It appears we unanimously adopted the minutes. Good job, everyone. I'm going to turn actually the time now over to Cameron Dale, our Executive Director, to introduce a special guest.
Thank you, Council Member, and thank you everybody for being here at the Capitol. Before we get underway, I wanted to introduce Wesley Harper, who is the Executive Director of the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities, who's joining us for the week. So Wesley, I'll give you a moment just to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. Again, my name is Wesley Harper. I'm the Executive Director for the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities. I'm here as a guest of CAM. What Utah does and what CAM engineers as part of his legislative communication protocol is second to none. And I'm really here for the week to go through following him, shadowing and understanding how his protocols and processes work to take back to Nevada what I think we could benefit from. So thank you very much for your hospitality. Everybody's been so very warm and I appreciate you, Cam. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Wes. We're happy to have you. Wes has been director of the Nevada League for about 2.5 years now, right? Or no, almost 3 years. Almost 3 years now. So excited to have him see what we do. We go to a lot of conferences together through the National League of Cities, and it's amazing the number of state leagues that don't really engage with their members during the legislative session. So I've given presentations on all of the engagement we do, from the daily email to LPC and everything in between. And that's why Wes wanted to come shadow and see it for himself. So that's a good segue for your email list that's being floated around.
I don't know if you know this, but you have to keep up with Cam while you're here, which means don't plan to sleep on this trip. And prepare to answer texts at 2 or 3 in the morning from a myriad of these people here in the room. If any of you are having trouble receiving the league emails, there is a sign-in list that is right over here where you can add your name in your email. If for some reason you've stopped receiving Friday Facts or other things, some people have noticed they've dropped off the list. I dropped off the list. I'm assuming that wasn't intentional. So let us know if we need to add you back on. Please keep in mind that if you have any motions, comments, feedback you want to give today on any of the issues, there will be microphones floating around so that those that are joining us remotely on Zoom can hear what is being said. So I know that sometimes your comment is super witty and you want to say it fast, but if you can hold on to it for just a minute, then we can make sure that everybody on our Zoom meeting can hear from us. Okay, so with that, now I'm going to turn it over to the league staff to do the really important part. And I believe we're going to Molly first to talk about our local administrative advisor.
Hi, I'm Molly. Trying to learn how to, is PowerPoint on here?
Slido first.
Oh.
Right. So before we get to Molly, you're welcome to stay up here. We're going to do a Slido again. So everybody who had issues at the last at the convention center, hopefully we'll be able to work through those today. So get on the Wi-Fi if you haven't. There's public Wi-Fi, CapNet. Join the Slido. We'll do 2 quick introductory questions. just to get everybody kind of acquainted with the system. And then there really will only be one meaningful question towards the middle of the presentation. So I'll keep this up here for just a second and we'll start. All right, so first, yeah. Yeah, I said CapNet, didn't I? Yeah, the Wi-Fi is CapNet. You'll have to click a little authentication page, but it should let you right in. All right, so yeah, we'll just ask quickly who all is here today. Awesome. You'll be able to keep filling this out, but I'll move the screen along. Next, we'll be asking what your title is. And this data just helps us better understand who our normal LPC attendees are, so we can target our communication, our outreach better to you. All right, well, it looks like Slido is working better since we've already had more Slido participants than all of last week. So let me know if you have any issues, and otherwise we'll keep moving along. So I'll turn it over to Molly.
Excellent. Perfect. So we've been chatting with y'all about this concept for a while in different capacities with UCMA, with some of the AOGs, and then with some smaller work groups. So what we are looking at is an appropriations request for a local administrative advisor. The local administrative advisor is a concept to try to help the essentially 145-ish small cities and towns throughout the state that do not have any administrative staff. So these are folks where, you know, the mayor is also, you know, everyone in these places are, you know, doing double duty with everything. And in addition to their elected capacity, they also have these administrative duties. And so the goal is to get some folks embedded regionally throughout the state, as well as at the league, who can be helping these small folks updating their codes and ordinances to making sure they're aligning you know, with state code and state priorities, leadership and management training, kind of anything across the board to really make sure that these folks have what they need to be running efficient and accessible and transparent local governments. We're looking at, it's a $1.58 million ongoing appropriations request, and we're letting you all know this now because it will be addressed in Wednesday morning's Executive Offices and Criminal Justice Appropriations Subcommittee. We have the committee members here. If any of those senators or representatives are your senator or representative, it would be very helpful if you could reach out to them and let them know about how important this request is. It went through the UEOC. It's a priority of the governors as well. So we're well on our way to getting this program up and running. But any help that our members can offer us in helping us get this across the finish line will be huge.
Perfect. Thank you, Molly. And thank you to the UCMA leadership for your help in crafting that appropriations request. We think it'll be a game changer for a lot of our small communities around the state. And we've had multiple mayors and who have contacted us asking for help on that space. So we're going to pivot away from that to just a quick update on housing and land use related issues. We spent a lot of time at LPC last week on these issues. So today is more of a quick update because then we're going to hit we're going to spend most of the time talking in the general public safety space with justice courts, retirement, and the like. So first, we wanted to make you aware that there is now an open request for an audit on housing affordability ordinances at the local level. We anticipate this audit won't be done until the summer or early fall, but the request was made last week. You can see where it is at the bottom of the screen. There are a bunch of legislative audits in front of it. But I want to make it clear, this is not an audit through Auditor Dougal's office. This is through the Office of the Legislative Audit General, which is more of a performance-based rather than a financial-based audit. So we just want to make sure that was on your radar screen. The audit, the legislative leadership oversees those audits and has audit committee subcommittees. In fact, the RDA bill we're working on this year came in part because of the legislative auditor's audit on RDAs last year. Okay, the other thing just wanted to highlight for you, general rules of engagement on growth. You can click this link, but it really can just find it from the league website. This is the policy resolution the league membership endorsed several years ago. It's 5 pages long. That's why it's the whole thing's not up on the screen. But the league membership endorsed that policy resolution 5 years ago. So that's still our general sandbox when it comes to growth and housing. But several interesting developments just in recent days. So Friday, Utah Business released this press release that showed that Utah is the state with the most new construction homes being developed in the country. So many of you have been asking us since LPC, what do you want us proactively to tell the legislators about what's happening on the ground in land use and in housing? Well, Utah Business released this on Friday. The link's at the top. It was in Friday Facts, on the front page of Friday Facts on Friday, but please share this information with your legislators. John Hiskey, we got this 5 minutes later. John copied me on a bunch of emails to his delegation saying, hey, Taylorsville representatives, want to make sure you saw this article. So that's the first piece of what you can proactively be telling your legislators. The second piece, though, is making sure you personalize it to your city and telling the story of what's been happening in your city when it comes to planning for growth. Well, as a reminder, we went through this in detail on Wednesday. The bill still is not yet drafted. It's in the process of being drafted, but what we know it'll be in the initial version of the Commission on Housing Affordability Bill will be the subdivisions proposal that we proactively offered in the fall. As a reminder, we talked about that at the October LPC and got your feedback before we actually made that proposal the first week in November. Some potential changes around station area plans, a lot of moving pieces on station area plans, so stay tuned on that. Internal accessory dwelling units, we're expecting a couple of modifications to House Bill 82 from a couple of years ago. And then there's still a lot of appetite up here for additional consequences for a city that is not in compliance with 462. Now, the good news over the last few days is we've had a lot of positive feedback from different stakeholders as we've been working through the growing pains of 462 implementation. If your city still has not received a letter of compliance from DWS, recognize the clock is ticking, and by mid-February, the clock is going to run out. So make sure you're in communication with DWS to work through those compliance steps, because that'll be a critical data point for us as we follow up on this conversation of potential consequences and what to do with cities that are out of compliance. There are a lot of growing pains from that bill. So in addition to what's listed on the screen as 1 through 4, we've been working with the bill sponsors to clean up some of those technical issues that came out of 462. And many of your cities have been in contact with us offering recommendations, particularly around the issue of how to get credit for ongoing efforts that your city is doing. So know that we've heard those, but if you have any other feedback about compliance challenges, now is the time to let us know while the bill is being drafted. So assuming we fix it, this is the question we asked it at Local Officials Day last week, but because of the technology challenges at the Hyatt, we wanted to give one last chance for feedback. So Matt Dixon, thank you for suggesting that we do it one more time here, because we didn't get nearly as many responses at the Hyatt because of the Wi-Fi challenges. So again, these are items, some of which have come up through the CHA, some of which have been more hallway conversations, but really all we're asking for from this group right now is to rank in the Slido in a moment from most objectionable to least objectionable, because it will help the league officers and league staff as we're having the dialogue with leadership and other stakeholders about where folks and what's least acceptable versus most acceptable, or objectionable and least objectionable. Carson, is there anything I need to do to explain Slido? Yep. So Carson, do you want to just make one last announcement about it?
Once again, just scan the link here, fill it out. There should be 10 options to be able to go through.
Okay, while he does that, I'm just scanning the chat room, and there's a question from Paul Larson of what would the legislative auditor be looking for? And the answer from what we were told this morning is they have initiated it, but they have not started laying out the ground rules for it. So stay tuned. When I come back to appropriations requests that we're working on, I'll have a little more detail on that front. Then we've got a few people asking about Friday Facts. So let's just make sure we collect those. Okay, so I can just advance now, right?
Yep.
You sure?
Pretty sure.
Perfect.
Great.
Great. Well, excellent. Okay, so make sure you fill that Slido out. Does anybody have any problems with the Slido while Carson's still up front?
Did it close? Oh, never mind.
What? Okay, perfect. Oh, perfect. Phew. It's a good thing we don't have a no cell phone policy at LPC, otherwise we'd be a little bit of trouble here. Right, right.
And if you have any additional thoughts on any of these items or additional feedback, feel free to reach out to me. My email is keilers@ulct.org. And yeah, if you want to explain your responses, or if you want to add additional items, or just vent, then we're happy to hear it.
The other thing I'll add is that first line really is the critical piece, right? We're assuming we fix 462 and have the better housing data. And let me give you an update on the housing database. House Bill 462 last year it contemplated the creation of a housing database that the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute won the RFP to manage. They got a late start. That database won't really be operational until the summer. So that's just a tidbit. They're also looking for ongoing money for it for this year, but that would help us get better city-specific housing data to help inform the policy discussions that right now still happen at a more of a high level aggregate or high aggregate level. Okay. I still see enough people looking down. I'll wait another moment before I close out.
Looks like we have already surpassed how many responses we had last time.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Do you want to start talking through land use task force? Well,
No, because I'll have that on the screen. I promised Justin I'd be fast, but I don't think I should be held accountable for this.
we'll take this out of your shot clock.
Okay, I see enough faces looking up at me. I can see 66. So I'll give you another 30 seconds or so. There used to be a clock right there. Oh, well, okay. Okay. We're up to 82, 83. Okay, I'm going to go for about 10 more seconds. Five more seconds. Okay. Going once, going twice, off we go. Up to 94, perfect. 96. Again, if you have follow-up questions, let us know. A lot of those items are not in any bill right now, but they've been the subject of hallway conversations. And so this is our quick chance to get a gut check from you about some of the ideas in those hallway conversations. In addition to the Commission on Housing Affordability Bill, there's also the Land Use Task Force Bill. And I want to thank all of the attorneys and planners who've been actively engaged with us with the Land Use Task Force over the last 12 months. So these are the main items that we've been working toward, some of which we've reached consensus on, some of which are still being actively negotiated, annexation, development agreements, development standards, which I'll let Justin explain momentarily, making some technical changes for when local governments can require plan resubmission and review to determine completeness from 98 from a couple years ago, when a local government can require a bond to complete privately owned landscaping that has a quasi-public use, and then when moratoriums can be used. So again, these topics we've been working through for months, but we wanted to make sure to put them out here before everything is signed on the dotted line, so that if your city had any questions or any concerns about any of these issues, you can follow up with us. You can follow up with me. You can follow up with Todd Godfrey, who's our who's our land use advisor. You can follow up with Sean Guzman or Gary Crane or Lynn Pace or Angela Price or Paul Nielsen from Salt Lake or Ryan Luce from South Jordan or Mark Harrington from Park City. There's a good cross section of local government folks that have been involved in land use task force. So again, if there's anything up there you have questions about or concerns about from your city, make sure we know now as we're wrapping up the negotiations on them. Likewise, outside of land use task force and outside of CHA is LIDS and our LIDS subgroup of the LPC that we established last week. We'll be meeting several times this week. So lots of moving pieces still, but the good news is it's only week 2 and there's still a lot of work to be done. Justin, I'll let you explain development standards because you and Sean and Gary were in those meetings last week. Any other questions for me about where we're at with UEOC, Land Use Task Force in general, or the Commission on Housing Affordability? Okay, then the last thing I'll say is this. As of now, our understanding of the housing and land use universe is what we've just described to you. Inevitably, there are going to be additional bills and additional ideas that are going to pop up. So stay tuned. And then if you hear of additional bills in the land use space, let us know as soon as possible, because all of the concepts we've just described to you have been deliberated on for the last few weeks, or in some cases months. And again, there's still work to be done on them, but it's also only, there's a typo. Yeah, but it's also only week 2. So thank you for your participation. Justin, take it away.
All right, this is a quick update. Gary Crane and Sean Guzman have both been working on this, so you can tell they did not send the most qualified person to do a quick update on this, so it's not going to be super in depth, but just want to talk about current state of negotiations. There's ongoing negotiations when it comes to development standards discussion. We've showed slides in previous LPCs that showed what the PRC's proposal was versus what our counter proposal was. We've just simplified it down to the current state of negotiations. You can see it all up here on the slide. I'm not going to talk about too much of it, just going to mention on number 2, if you remember, their proposal is 25 feet. We've been holding the line at 32 feet and talking about some exceptions to the standard for some various things. I want to talk about number 5 really quickly. On review timelines, we're talking about a shot clock for both sides, both the applicant and for the city on certain things, and then a 4 review maximum. Meaning if there's no additional requirements come in, something with life, health, safety that needs to come in, we're gonna have a 4 review maximum. But that also means that on each application or each back and forth, all of the red lines need to be addressed in order for it to count as one of those submissions. So if you put everything in and you have 9 red lines on there and they only respond to 8, you send it back to them, that does not count against the 4 submissions back and forth. And then then we'll work on having a list of what is a complete submission and the required, and sorry, there's typos all over this because we're doing it right before. We'll fix it before we send it out. Not all required studies, but required submissions. That says again, number 6, but working through the negotiations, we'll come back with a more complete proposal that we can take a position on. But just wanted to bring this to your attention. If you have questions, concerns, things you want to talk about, things that we're not looking at, please let Gary or Sean or I know, and we can talk through that. But with that, any quick questions or thoughts on that? Mark and Liam will bring you the microphone.
So you're saying that if they don't address a red line, that doesn't count as one of their reviews?
Mhm.
Excuse me, but why wouldn't that count as one of their reviews if they're not meeting
it
the
wouldn't-
red lines? If they don't incorporate those, that should knock one of their red lines off.
Let me flip it a different way. If they submit it and they have those 8 and they review it, but not the 1, that's not one of our reviews either, because that was part of it, is just 4 total and they could game that. So that's still in review 1. It's just we're going to say in review 1 until everything's completed in that review. Sean, if you want to address that.
So the 4 reviews that they're saying is 4 reviews for us to address anything that we are requiring of them. Saying is, if you submit plans and we draw red lines on them, we give them back to you, and there are 10 items. But as Justin said, you only address 9. That doesn't count as one of our 4 strikes. We get 4 strikes. Doesn't count as one of our 4 strikes because you did not address everything that were in the red lines. Because if you're going to hold us to only 4 reviews where we can bring up something that was missed in one of our ordinances or state law, and then we're doing a carve out for those things that we think are life safety that we can't waive. And we can't waive, of course, a building code requirement either. But what we're saying is if we have an ordinance requirement, mostly this is what it's going to apply to, and we haven't addressed it in those 4 reviews, then we don't get to raise it after those 4 reviews. That's why we're clarifying that if you don't address all of our red lines, it doesn't count as one of our 4 strikes.
I guess my question is, why are more reviews for them for free?
And I will say this, even at our last meeting, Chris Gambrillo started off, Ivory Holmes started off saying, we get it. We hear what you guys are saying. We've got some engineers that are not doing their jobs out there, and they're cities more work, but they're also causing those good developers and good engineers that are giving us good plans to have to wait longer because we're reviewing someone else's plan for the 3rd time. So that's why we have some shot clocks on them on getting them turned back to us. We haven't hammered out all that language, but that's where we are. So this is the first time that we've got them to recognize that they've got some duty on their side. They're part of the reason why our system is, and we think we're working as fast as we can, is because we literally have to some of us, we're just submitting what we got right now just to get in line. And they know that we're going to do their work for them and bleed all over it and make all the corrections for them and actually do their work. But we should not, as cities, be doing the work of engineers. They should be turning it in right the first time. Yes, and I totally agree with you, Mark. And you saw the pushback that I got. Well, maybe you weren't on the meetings when I said there should be shot clocks back on them for turning them around and some kind of penalty for them if we have to review these plans over and over again.
Okay, any other comments on thoughts on this one? Again, we don't have a bill. We're not taking a position on this. We're just letting you know where we're at on the negotiations. Okay. All right, Cam, I'm going to give it back to you to talk about.
Oh, actually, it's retirement.
Oh, retirement.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the surplus piece?
Well, I'll just hit the message and then. Okay. So I'll come back when we get to revenue on the agenda. But before we jump into the retirement things that we need to deliberate on here, the second key message that Mayor Silvestrini was trying to get across at Local Officials Day, that we need to make sure all of us are driving home to legislators, is the state of Utah has a surplus, but cities don't. We have been successful in years past pointing out to them the ripple effect of potential changes on tax policy. Y'all remember tax reform from a few years ago, where we were basically unaffected by the tax reform discussions up here because we were able to make that case of the ripple effect of anything the state did on local government budgets. So same thing as part of the discussion here. Molly, where did Molly go? Molly, there you are. Molly is actually, she tracks the fiscal impact of every bill. And this year we're providing on a regular basis to state leaders a spreadsheet that shows the aggregate amount of those fiscal impacts. So it's not just this one bill with this fiscal impact. It's here are these 15 bills that in the aggregate have this fiscal impact. So as you're talking to legislators, this is just a simple way to remind them that while they have a historic amount of surplus money and they're trying to balance the surplus with all the uncertainty in the economy, we too are trying to balance the uncertainty of the economy, but without the surplus. So with that, let's have a conversation on retirement.
Excellent. So 3 of those bills that have a fiscal impact that we're looking at relate to retirement. Obviously, for our purposes, it's almost exclusively a public safety component. First, we're looking at HB 104. This is very similar to HB 12 that Representative Gwynn ran last year. It has some changes from last year. It's a shorter, it's a kind of a midterm years of service compared to last time, as well as the multiplier. But effectively what it does, 3 things. 1, it reduces the 1-year period of separation to 90 days, and that includes a 2027 sunset. It also increases the multiplier from 2% to 2.27% for the tier 2 hybrid employees. And then it also reduces the years of service from 25 to 22 years. It's worth noting that the multiplier and the years of service do not have a sunset right now. There's been some talk that there might be a substitute, which does sunset that provision, but right now the sunset only applies to the cooling off period. For that, and I would encourage, LFA has their kind of general local fiscal note, but URS also has some great analysis that we link to later in this document that you can kind of figure out what that exact cost might look like for your agency or your city. So you can kind of look and see what that is. It would be $23.2 million plus ongoing, and URS has some good analysis as to how that really compounds as tier 2 grows. So I would definitely encourage you to look at that. Essentially 23 is the basement of what this will cost. Berkland also has 2 retirement bills. I'm not total, in committee she's spoken to, I think if Gwen's bill is the bill that goes through, she won't push hers as hard. And we also don't know exactly which of the 2 she wants to run because they are fairly similar. So for 125, it reduces, it applies to public safety, also applies to teachers. It reduces the post-retirement reemployment period from 1 year to 60 days. It allows teachers in public safety to come back to work part-time and that they cannot earn more than 50% of their salary pre-retirement or $15,000 annually. They're also not eligible for any benefits aside from essentially workman's comp. This looks like it's about $5.4 million ongoing. And again, URS has some great analysis as to what that could mean for your specific city. And then for Berkland's 126, it kind of has a qualifying retiree versus a non-qualifying retiree. So the qualifying is that public safety and teacher component. It essentially removes the period of separation. And within that, qualifying retirees can return to work and earn $35K in a year, and then non-qualifying retirees can come back to work and in that 1 year period be earning $15,000. And that bill does include an inflationary adjustment for those salaries to go up as well. So that's generally what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, I was going to just say, when I talked to Gwen about the bill, why is he running the bill? Why is he wanting to adjust tier 2? He believes this is a retention issue within law enforcement. He also believes it's a recruiting tool. So whether or not you believe that, but that's his theory for running the bill.
Mm-hmm.
There's always been a lot of talk about adjusting the tier 1 and trying to get it back to somewhat level with the tier 1. And then this is what that's about. He also told me that Berkland's bills are his backup bills for this. I don't know what that really meant, other than the fact that he's working with Berkland to try to, if his bill doesn't work out, there'll be some other language, either 126 or 125. So we just want to watch them closely. But they all have fiscal impacts on us. So.
So we have one question online from Aaron Wells. What does URS say about if Gwen's bill is funded from the URS side?
I don't think that his intentions is that local government will pay for the fiscal impact. It doesn't go back to URS.
Thanks.
And it also, his bill, as with all of these, that it doesn't include the employee pickup. And so a lot of these will still continue to cost. Yes, it'll cost the local governments more, but the tier 2 employees will also be needing to pay more into their own retirement plans. And Gwen has said, well, obviously the local governments will pick that up. And so surprise for you.
I was going to say, and
Yeah.
it depends on where you are in the previous tier 2 adjustment. If you adopted that as part of your plan with your employees, then he told me, Gwen told me that 95% of most local governments picked up that piece for their employees. So he's assuming the rest we would pick that up as well. So you're talking about 2 pieces, the employee piece and then the city piece that you would pick up.
has Representative Gwen, have you discussed with him whether he would include 911 dispatch in these bills? Or are they left out? Setting aside all of those other budget issues you just raised.
It's anybody who qualifies for public safety retirement. I don't know whether dispatchers are in the 20-year program or not.
Spatafours are giving me the nod. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
If your dispatchers are already, or if you plan to have them in the public safety system, this will incorporate them.
My understanding when this was brought up last year was that this would likely lead to increasing police wages and a lot more early retirements and then switching over. Do we expect that to happen with this bill? Am I correct in that?
I don't know if that's his intent. It doesn't cover that in the bill, really. It just deals with the retirement piece. I did talk to him though, specifically, speaking for South Jordan City, who I work for, about the amount of money that we've invested in public safety since 2019. And that this is hard to take, understanding how much money local governments already invested in public safety personnel. And particularly I'm talking about salaries, which has been significant to most of us, and including into the millions of dollars. But that hasn't swayed him at all. He is asking us to be at least neutral on this bill. We did get to neutral on a part of his bill last year. Do you remember which part it was, Molly? Wasn't it just the
Yeah.
90-day?
So we got to neutral when he substituted the bill, and it was only the cooling off period.
He did tell me, I don't know, he was looking to get Senator Bramble to sponsor the bill in the Senate. He said if Bramble were to come on with him, he would extend the 90-day to 6 months cooling off period. So that would lessen to some degree a small portion of the cost, but it's still a lot.
Thank you. Just for clarification, cooling off, you're referencing the time period that's being adjusted into which they could proceed with this. So this 90-day.
Once you
whatever it
retire,
is,
then it would be 90 days.
that you
before
can decide in or out.
re-engage. Yeah.
Would that be okay? Okay, thank you.
I have one additional question, and then I'm going to hand you the mic to run back to the Spataforce because it's for them. Have the Police Chiefs Association reviewed and taken a position on HB 104?
Yeah, so the police chiefs have supported the bill, HB 104. Fire chiefs have not reviewed the bill yet.
All right, thank you.
All right, well, while Roger's working up to talk about justice courts, just an update, if you have not heard, Representative Hawkins has agreed to hold the justice court bill, so it will not be heard this afternoon when it was originally scheduled. Talked to him this morning, let him know we have some concerns, some things we need to work through, and he's agreed to hold the bill until the Thursday committee hearing after we talk and have a chance to work through some of the issues. So with that, I'll let you talk about it, Roger.
Someday I won't have that, I hope. Believe it or not, I have dealt with the issue of how do we deal with courts of limited jurisdiction longer than I have dealt with state tax policy. In fact, it goes back 45 years. I'm approaching my friend Dave Spathforth's territory at that point. So I have seen circles coming back multiple times. So nothing quite surprises me on this. But let me tell you a little bit where things ended. You knew there was a special task force that had been looking at justice courts for the last 3 years. It was commissioned by the State Court Administrator's Office. We had various presentations to LPC over the last 2 years. It ended with the situation of no one knew what the financial consequences were. So the courts had commissioned a study to do an outside review of the cost. They could not complete that this year and basically said, we've done what we can done right now. And so handed that back to the legislature and said, sort of, where do you want us to go on this particular issue? That was reported at the November interim, the last interim of this last year. The courts did say at that time, however, that they had several items that they wanted to bring for the administrative office of the courts, clarifying relationships with the justice courts and the state. It would have been nice to have known what those were. They wish they'd talked to us, but we didn't know them until this bill came out. So wanted you to know that's the genesis of this particular bill. I want you to also, Representative Hawkins is the sponsor of this bill, but I know he's done this in conjunction with Senator Colomar. So there's not going to be another bill coming from that side. The bill basically has 4 different components to it, many of which are advantageous to the current situation. First of all, I'm agnostic about this. One more study doesn't bother me. This creates a legislative justice court task force that is to examine the issue over the next 3 years. I don't think they're starting over again from where the last one ended up. I don't know, but that's what that is. That's fine. One more study is one more study. I have nowhere where that wants to go. But the portions that did come from the administrative office of the courts, the ones I do want to talk about because those were relatively new. First of all, it clarifies the issue on justice court salaries. This is a plus. When in 2007, there was the last, or I would say, comprehensive legislation, so to speak, on justice courts. Some of you were around. I know Gary was, and Lynn Pace, I see, and others. Basically, we were within an eyelash of having the justice court system struck down by the state Supreme Court. And on the basis that there was far too much of a political relationship that existed in the cities, there was too much interference with justice courts providing fair trials. And there were enough legitimacy to some of those concerns that we were basically said, something has to be done. There were a couple of proposals that came out, which in hindsight, in some ways, Lynn, I would say probably don't look all that bad. Some of the ones that we said no to at the time. But the current structure came out of that 2007 legislation. One of those was there had to be somewhat of a uniform salary structure. If you'll remember, the salary structure started at 50 to 90% of a district court judge's salary. In the intervening years, virtually every court's at 90, at the max. This basically says there's no more range. It's 90% of a judicial court salary. That's fine. It also eliminates the problem that exists in some quarters of if you gave your employees raises, did that have to apply to your judge? No. The salary is 90%, end of discussion. That's a plus in that regard. The other is that the requirement that all justice court judges had to be attorneys. For the bulk of the population of the state, that is the current law. The areas in the smaller counties off the Wasatch Front, the challenge was, what do you do if you don't have an attorney in your city? What this does is it presents the approach that is actually parallel a little bit to what has happened with the other courts, juvenile district court judges, in that you can apply for the position not living in that area, provided you agree to move to that area if you're given the position. Now, most of the non-Wasatch Front counties, their courts are administered at the county level, not the city level. It might surprise you to know we have 95 cities that have their own municipal justice courts. 60 of them are in 5 counties on the Wasatch Front. It's very much an urban center count. We basically have 16 counties that in effect have very limited number of city court or municipal justice courts. So that's the proposal there. How that flies, whether that solves a problem, I don't know, but that's that particular issue. The third area deals with who the administration of the courts and who is that accountable for, and here's the friction point. I want to emphasize a couple of things. I have said this repeatedly, so I hope this is not the first time people are hearing it. Justice courts are part of the state judicial system. It is not a part of the municipal government. They are part of the state judicial system. cities and counties were given the option of whether they wanted to have one or not. They can leave the system if they want, but it's part of the state judicial system. They're governed by the state judicial council, of which justice courts are members of the state judicial council. The administrative arm of the state judicial system is the administrative office of the courts. So therefore, there is an administrative role that that office has and has had. That's the current law and has been for a long time. The question that what HB 210 raises is, everybody understood that as it related to the judge and it related to judicial decisions, that sort of issue. The question is, it relates to the support personnel for the court. In other words, as it sits right now, in most cases, the cities are in charge of the administration of that support personnel. This would basically put that back more under the direction of the courts. And therein lies the question of, given that our cities pay for the system, and that's their choice, shouldn't they have some involvement in terms of the hiring and firing and evaluation of personnel? It's a fair question. And one of the questions we have to deal with is, at what point does that move to the arena that we're compromising the independence of the court? But we don't think it necessarily has to be as absolute as this particular bill frames it. That's the rub issue on that point. One of the things we want to raise is, we think there's a way of having that more of a mutual involvement rather than absolute involvement, and still maintaining the integrity of the independence of the judiciary. But I'll make this one last editorial comment. I don't know long-term where things may go with the legislature on looking at justice courts. The motivation today is not the performance of the courts. That was not the case 15 years ago. We have excellent justice court judges. We have excellent courts. They're doing a good job. The study of the last 3 years was never about that. It was about the motivation from the prosecution community. They don't want to do double trials. Is there a way of getting rid of the de novo system? To do that, you have to have a new court system. That's really what started that. And then the question of, and I will say this is out there, are we efficiently allocating where our justice courts are located in a fashion that best uses resources? I think this is a matter of public record. Lincoln's not here, can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the Salt Lake County Council has voted to disband their court at the county level. Now, that hasn't been implemented, but trust me, that sort of a decision makes some major changes of where we're going. And it gets down to the question of sort of a hodgepodge system, particularly on the Wasatch Front, of where we got courts at, I think is an issue of serious examination. But be that as it may, if we're going to keep justice courts viable, in the end, we're going to end up with something that is remarkably close to the provisions that are lined out in this bill. That doesn't mean I don't think there's got to be changes made, but I want to let you know we're going to have to come up with maintaining the independence of the courts. I think we need to preserve a portion that we have of the city involvement, but we really are in sort of walking that line of preserving the integrity of the courts, but also the involvement of our cities. So we've asked Representative Hawkins, he said we could talk with him. I have not heard anything from the counties about this. And like I said, they actually represent more of our cities than we do on this particular issue. But anyway, that's a quick summary of the issues that are involved. That's what we'll be talking with Representative Hawkins about and with the courts about.
All right, thank you for that overview, Roger. We have a few days to work through this to talk to Representative Hawkins. If you're interested in talking with us about justice courts, working on that issue, please let us know. Would obviously love some input from a few different sources. But with that, just any quick questions or comments on the justice courts issue. You give it to me later? All right. You're not quite to your limit yet. You have a few more comments. Okay, perfect. Okay, Cam, back to you. I know you said we're going to get up again, but you know.
Perfect, thanks. Just a quick logistics issue. At 2 o'clock in this room is going to be a committee hearing on the voucher legislation. So legislative staff has notified us that we need to make sure we clear the room with enough time for them to do it. We should still be good till 1:30. So if you're here for a voucher meeting, that's not till That's not till later. We're still going through city stuff now. Wanted just to give you a quick overview of the appropriations requests that most of these the board endorsed during the interim, but just so everybody's aware of what's out there. So last year, around growth, these were the first item was what we asked for, the Guiding Our Growth public engagement effort that's coming through the governor's office. We've been on the stakeholder committee there. They still haven't, they've kicked it off, but it isn't out in full force yet. So stay tuned on that one. The housing database I referenced earlier, the Gardner Policy Institute earned the RFP, and they're hoping to have that database live in the summer. There was also an appropriation last year that Envision Utah received to review ordinances that relate to land use and housing. We've also reached out to them to talk through the scope of work and other things. And then many of you attended the town halls last year that Envision Utah and Craig Call and the league and others helped to organize. Conversation we've been having with leadership is what does round two look like? And there's been some dialogue around getting some state appropriations to help on resources to help cities do templates or like a library of resources for local governments. So that's in the general sense on growth. Piece two on infrastructure. And some of these are among our biggest asks this session. The first ask is modifying the fifth. We've talked about that in policy meetings before, but right now 100% of that fifth goes to transit if the county imposes it. It expires in June. And so we've been asking all year, and we've gotten some good positive feedback of having a portion of the fifth, if the county imposes it, have a portion of it go directly to cities that then you would control in your budgets. And we've had the discussion about tying this to 462 compliance, assuming that we get all the rules right. The second big ask has been with the State Infrastructure Bank and investing in that at historic levels and making that available for local governments. And this really carries off from the local match program last year with the ARPA dollars. Right now, the reason it says 35 to 150 million is because the governor's budget requested 35 million. Some in the legislative leadership have said maybe this should be 150 million. And this would be, again, an opportunity for cities to apply for these infrastructure dollars to help fund not just roads, which it has done historically, but also water and sewer. And then the governor's requested 100 million for active transportation grants. Again, this was one of our priorities. We've endorsed the concept, working through the potential dollars there. There was a Lincoln Friday fax that's also linked here, where you can individually sign a letter endorsing that ask for the creation of a state fund for active transportation at historic levels. To put that $100 million in context, I represent the league on the Outdoor Recreation Advisory Committee that provides grant money to local governments, state dollars, to local governments for trails and outdoor recreation amenities. The amount of money on average last few years in that fund has been about $5.5 million. So to go from a fund about $5.5 million that local governments can access to the governor's budget request of $100 million for active transportation is a game changer for the state of Utah. So those are in the infrastructure space. On the public safety space, did I hear? Former representative / former league president / current city manager, Mike Winder. Or Mike.
Thanks, Cam. But parking, it's horrible out there. I had to park on the street for the first time in 6 years.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, I know. Had to walk through the public entrance. Anyway, question on the infrastructure. Does the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant Fund change at all with that? Or are they planning to go steady with that? Because that is a great fund.
Yeah, that is a great fund. I'd say to be determined, because in years past, that fund has been in the governor's office of economic opportunity. Last year, the legislature moved it to natural resources, but that fund still exists. In fact, I got an email last week that they're hoping to add an additional $1.5 million to that particular fund, which is obviously broader than just trails, whereas this would be for trails. So stay tuned on how all the pieces fit together, but we wanted to make sure you were aware of that sign-on letter because this could have really tremendous positive impacts in your communities. On the public safety piece, last year, for the first time, we were successful getting state dollars into the public safety mitigation account to match the local money that goes into it. We had a really powerful board meeting last week where we were talking through this issue. We're expecting legislation in the next couple of weeks that ideally will provide additional state dollars in that fund, but also require additional local contributions into that fund as well. So stay tuned on all those moving pieces. In addition, the league board endorsed Wayne Niederhauser's revenue request for additional state dollars for HRC operations and services. So to give you one of the presentations we made to the league board is 5 years ago, there were 5 homeless resource centers that qualified for this funding. That number is more than doubled in the state of Utah in the last 5 years. And then on the housing side, you can see there's a variety of dollars. All of these came through the Commission on Housing Affordability. The league board endorsed them. A couple of quick ones to highlight for your employees is a state appropriation request to help first-time home buyers. Last year it was for police officers and trying to keep that going, but also money for firefighters. Likewise, making some changes to the Olene Walker Fund to add both more money, but also increase the tax credit cap to make it easier for these projects to get built. And then dollars specifically for rural Utah to help on housing. So we thought it was important for you as a policy committee to see the appropriation space. I see a hand back there, but you're angelic, so I can't really. But to see the scope of appropriations requests in addition to the shared local administrative advisor.
So I had a quick question on, for example, House Bill 462. One of the menu options was to create a fund for down payment assistance for city employees. As I've reviewed a lot of those, a lot of cities have went that route. Is the legislature possibly looking at expanding that to most cities instead of just public safety?
Yeah, good question. So with respect to 462, that is an option for cities to select. In this case, what the state was looking was for basically a state fund that then those officers could apply. But it is a good question about how the intersection would work between a city that has that fund versus a state piece. So will you just follow up with, where's Carson? Probably best to follow up with Carson to make sure we crosswalk those two pieces. Okay, any other questions of the general appropriation space? Then let me add this final caveat on appropriations, because I get asked this question a lot, particularly by new mayors and council members who say, what's the role of the league in appropriations? We do not ask for specific dollars for Santaquin. Sorry, Santaquin. I know. Or for Taylorsville or for North Salt Lake. Where we've made a strategic shift in the last few years has been to get more involved where there's a policy hook and a policy nexus to larger state appropriations. So you can see in this case, there's a clear policy hook here. We don't know where trail money will be spent or infrastructure bank money will be spent. That's outside of our wheelhouse. But it's important for Murray and for Providence and for Conwood Heights to be aware that there could be a tremendous amount of money invested in these funds that will be available for cities in general. And we're trying to make sure we're helping shepherd those through the process. Tim, did my explanation cause a question? That was not the idea. Okay.
With those funds, is there any discussion on looking at eminent domain issues? Because you have all the funding, but the challenge is acquiring the property at times.
And I just noticed there are 24 chats, so I assume somebody's monitoring the chat room because okay. Thank you, Carson. Okay, so Tim had to ask about eminent domain. Thank you, Tim. So what he's asking about is eminent domain for trails, and if the answer is no, that's the short answer. And because of the time, I should stick with the short answer. I'm not going to, because 15 years ago, the legislature removed the ability of cities to use eminent domain for trails. And I was working at the league at the time, and it's one of my biggest regrets. My defense, I was way down here and in the organization, but that has been really difficult for not just cities, but for all local governments as we try to connect trail systems like the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. We brought that up repeatedly with the governor's staff through the summer. And be careful what you wish for, because in the governor's press conference on trails, he and Carlos were at the microphone, we were there. And before the press even asked any questions, they proactively said, our trails proposal does not contemplate eminent domain for trails. So as of now, the medium answer is no. But we have countless examples from Conwood Heights to Ogden of of where fantastic trail systems, fantastic trail systems could use that potential tool. But again, it's not even on the radar screen right now. I see, Councilmember. Yeah.
Hey, just a quick question. So Wayne Niederhauser, he is seeking funds for homeless resource centers. But then down under housing, it says significant state money for permanent supportive housing.
Yes.
Is that for new housing, brick and mortar, or are these existing spaces where he's seeking money? Can you kind of answer
Yes
that?
and yes. Yes and yes. So thank you, Councilmember, for the question on the operations side. He's seeking dedicated revenue just for operations, because right now he's competing in the general fund up here, so he's seeking dedicated revenue for those operations. And for the cities that have qualifying HRCs in their cities, they've all been operating at a shortfall operations wise, which then spills over outside and creates additional public safety impacts. If you can get more revenue inside the building, it could help outside the building. On the permanent supportive housing piece, the reason there's not a dollar amount there is because there's one fund he's looking at to maintain and preserve existing permanent supportive housing, but then he's also looking at additional revenue to provide more permanent supportive housing, which is housing units that have caseworkers and other services on site, but they're very expensive to do. So he's looking for state money. Last year, the legislature appropriated $55 million for permanent supportive housing and other housing programs, and they had $168 million worth of requests.
Okay, just to follow up, I heard, and I don't know if this is accurate whatsoever, but that there may be a push outside of Salt Lake County to develop more housing for homeless folks and whatnot. Has that been a part of the discussion with Wayne and part of that? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Having a more regional approach rather than just Salt Lake County specific. And because we've got to get to the public safety and water conservation, we'll come back on homelessness in general. But last year, House Bill 440 was very Salt Lake County focused. And what the Offices of Homeless Services and Representative Ellison are looking at is like, okay, how do we make sure it's not just Salt Lake County focused? Details are still being deliberated on. Okay. Any other final questions? Okay, Gary, take it away with public safety.
Which one moves it? Okay, this one is House Bill 64 by Wilcox, but it's simple, but yet it still has fiscal note to it that impacts us. So really what it does is add spouses and children to the already existing law that we would provide counseling for 3 years for law enforcement, mental health counseling. So the only question is how many visits can someone get? Every visit costs. I was in LALC earlier today. There's a few comments about maybe we should limit the number of visits, not the years. Anyway, it all costs us money in the end. So it's something we just need to figure out whether we support it or not. I think the concept in its general nature is good. Getting mental health support for families of law enforcement, public safety people. It's just at what expense do we bear that cost? Most cities cover this, municipalities through their EAPs. Some of those are limited to so many visits per year. But the bill doesn't address any of that. So it's something we may want to consider a little further of getting a little bit more into the weeds with it and maybe putting some restrictions on just how many visits that we might pay for. Currently, right now, it's 3 years. Any questions on that one? This one right here, I think its intentions, oh, yes. Oh, this says 64, it is 61. Okay. So this creates a state security chief position within DPS. This position will review all school safety plans. It's a little bit different than the fire marshal. State fire marshal is a little bit different in what they review, but this one's specific to school safety plans regarding like an intruder or a shooter type scenario. It works under DPS. It creates a task force that is a limited task force that will actually help create the criteria for that new position within DPS. One thing I wrote in red here, because I've heard from the police chiefs is a little concerning, maybe not for rural counties as much as urban, but it requires the sheriff to be to identify the individual within the department to coordinate all security responsibilities with the state chief that they have. So your county would report, your local jurisdiction report to the sheriff, and the sheriff would report to the state. So I'm not sure why that's in there, but maybe it was because rural counties often don't have municipality structures with law enforcement. But the next one is that it requires that all secondary schools have a school resource officer. So that's considered grades 7 through 12 or any part of those grades. If a school is like a charter school or a private school that has maybe 6 through 8, that would require an SRO. That there's no cost associated with this bill. It suggests in the bill that the department or the agency negotiate with the school, whether that's private or charter. I know that in our area, we have the Jordan School District in South Jordan, and we've negotiated a rate that the school district pays us, but it doesn't pay for the entire cost. And now you're going to be required to go back and negotiate with a single school, a charter or a private. It could be very challenging to get funding from them, but it doesn't allow us any other course of action.
Did you tell us who was running this bill?
Senator Wilcox,
That's right.
representative. 61.
61. Okay. This is a huge problem for us as a city because our charter schools can't afford one, nor do they want one, because the studies don't show that it actually increases safety. So our charter schools do not want this, and our city can't afford to even subsidize or pay for this. We can't afford our public safety as it is. And so this is a huge problem for cities.
Yes. Right here, Liam. Gary Hill. Or Mr. Hill.
Heaven forbid we confuse which Gary we're talking about, right, Gary?
Got a lot of Garys.
So does this, is the school resource officer, would these be full-time school resource officers?
The bill leaves it open for part-time. I just don't know how that works with most law enforcement agencies. It says full or part-time.
Sean Guzman, St. George. The only concern I have is it sounds good on the surface. We can go out and negotiate. How do you go and negotiate with the school district or a charter school when they point to this? You have to do this. So I don't have to pay. Right now, we have a interlocal with our school district, not with the charter schools, just with the school district, where they pay 50% of the cost. And then the cities, because our schools down in Washington County, we have most of the high schools in St. George, but a lot of times the students are from other cities. So we pay on the ratio of students per city, and then the cities contribute the other 50% for the officer in that where the school's jurisdiction is. But it makes it very difficult for us to be able to negotiate if the other side can just say, you have to do it, we don't have to pay.
It's problematic, and it's the way the bill stands right now. I don't know if we can support it or not, the way it's currently drafted. That's what I have.
Our position is pending on this one right now, not because we don't think people have feelings about it. For the people online, the position is pending right now. And I'll just say in general, there's a lot of positions pending on a lot of bills right now. We've been reviewing I don't know what's between 100 and 200, but hundreds, dozens plus hundreds of bills over the last week and a half. Well, more than that, but since a lot of things are getting numbered and finding positions on some of them. So we're working on positions. We're also looking at others like, LALC and others to get positions. But at the end of the meeting, we'll pull up the bill tracker. And like I said, we'll zoom through it really quickly and expect you all to understand what each and every one of those bills does so that we can take a position on it. But if someone would like to make a motion to take a position on a specific bill, that can be done. Or you can always reach out to us during the week and we come back next week with updated positions. So just explaining that, again, reminding you've heard and noticed there's a lot of people waiting to get in. So at 1:30, we will be done regardless of where we're at on the agenda. Yes, there will be a tunnel to get out. You can use the windows if you'd like. No. Sorry, no. Thank you for that motion, though. All right. Do you want to talk about a couple of water bills? This first one, HB 272, this is from Representative Owens. This bill was just numbered in the last day or so, although some of you may have seen a draft of this that we've shared around. Bill does a few things. And I guess before I go any further, let me say, we need to talk about this bill. There's a lot of things to talk about with the standards on this bill. So Councilman Ivy, I know that you wanted to talk about water bills. This is one I'll be reaching out. We'll be getting a group of people together to talk about some water bills, and this is one of them. But what Representative Owens is doing here is, one, raising the aggregate annual cap for state turf buyback from 5 million to 12.5 million. So he's looking for a lot more money for the program. Second thing is, a property owner would only be eligible for a flip your strip or turf buyback, however you want to say it, program if they live in a municipality that implements regional and then specific in the bill water use efficiency standards. So this bill is not saying you have to just implement these standards, period. They're saying if you want citizens in your municipality to be eligible for the flip your strip grant program, then you would have to have these requirements in there. So that distinction is important because it's not just saying this is a mandate of standards. It's saying it's a mandate of standards if you want to have citizens in your city be eligible for this flip your strip program. We're going to be reaching out and asking questions about how many people have adopted standards like this at this point. That'll be helpful information to have. But also we do want to talk about this. Representative Owens has indicated that he is willing to talk to us about what these standards look like. If you remember last year, we had several different bills that dealt with turf requirements that we were able to negotiate into more workable places. And we need to go negotiate and talk about that one. So with that background, if you looked at the bill tracker earlier, you may have noticed it said neutral. We've got a staff recommendation of petition pending on this one right now, since Representative Owens has said he's willing to talk to us on it, and we do have concerns. With that, happy to take any comments or questions on this one. Mark Christensen.
So I just want to throw this one on everyone's radars. We've been working with Central Utah on this issue. And basically what Justin said is correct. You don't have to necessarily implement this, but Central Utah, and I believe all of the other water districts, I believe are going to be pursuing a contract clause to all new water contracts that say any new water contracts you as a city want to enter into would require you to be compliant with this going forward. So consider what that ramification is. They're saying we have a choice, but then we're also being told that your choice is going to be taken away at some point if you need to enter into new water contracts. So while some of you may think this isn't a big deal today, take a look at it because it's pretty restrictive. And, obviously we're a young city. Our council's already looked at this. We've gone through what Central Utah was proposing, which is almost a mirror image of what's being proposed in this legislation. And it literally says you cannot people to have park strips or grass on their side yards. There's an enforcement component to this that I keep asking Central Utah, how are we going to enforce this in the future? It's a lot. I think we're agreeing to an awful lot. And frankly, our city doesn't review landscape plans for a home in the first place. And so this would require us to get into the game of reviewing every single landscape plan on all new construction. And so there's what seems to be a fairly innocuous tie to this, if you don't have to adopt it now, it's going to have serious teeth for you in the future. So keep an eye on that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Other comments? Yep. Okay.
Lisa Bingham with Syracuse City. I have a question, and maybe you can raise this when you're talking to them about the bill, about the efficacy of having the city make decisions where you have a homeowners association that also has some decisions made. We have a lot of questions in all the cities surrounding us that say which one takes precedence, which power am I beholden to? So I'd like to have that answered and with clarity. We haven't been able to really clear that up.
Okay, that's a good note. And then that is a tricky issue. We've heard that one before, so thank you for that. That's good. Any other comments on this one? Okay, like I said, we're going to be reaching out. We need some feedback on this one. Got a list of several people who have said they're interested in helping us on water issues. If you're interested in talking about this issue, feel free to shoot me an email, jlee@ulct.org. All right, one more, SB 118. This is Senator Sandals' bill. This one's a little bit different, but also related to kind of a flip your strip program. Basically, it says if you take a grant, do a flip your strip, and then you put grass back in, they want the money back. That's what it says. And they could ultimately put a lien on the property to get that money back if you didn't. This is run through the conservancy districts. It's not something that a city or town would be expected to run, but I want to let you know about it and put it on your radar because it is in this water efficient landscaping space. Right now, neutral on it because it is through the conservation districts or conservancy districts, excuse me. But want to put it on your radar and get the chuckle that I got out of it because it is kind of a funny concept. Any questions or comments on that one? I have a lot of comments, but they're all snarky, so I'm just going to leave them there. All right, other bills that we want to bring up. Mr. Hiskey. SB 87, that is on the list of other bills to bring up, and we have a couple of minutes. Yeah, anything you'd like to say about it? Here, let's get the mic to you. So we're talking about SB 87 from Todd Weiler.
Yes. We have heard back from LELC and Gary Whatcott that it's a priority opposed. There's concern on the part of a person who is a defendant, is that correct? May be called into a private attorney's office for deposition. And it goes beyond that. The good person ahead of me here has all the detail, but we understand even Professor Cassell has concerns about this particular bill.
Yeah, let's bring it down to Brian really quick. Brian, we just want to hear your voice.
So the bill would actually allow a defendant to call a victim or a witness into a deposition prior to the trial. And that's very, obviously problematic. And there's no provision in the bill to pay for counsel to protect their rights. It allows a victim between 14 and 18 to have a parent there, but there's no requirement in there that pays for their attorney. So you have a victim or a witness in a crime, and they have to pay out of their own pocket for an attorney to protect their rights in a deposition. How many people are going to want to come forward and report a crime or be a witness to a crime? It's going to have a real chilling effect.
Absolutely. So SB 87 right now, sorry, did anybody else have a comment on this one before? Yeah, absolutely. So where this is at, it passed out of a committee last week, actually in this very room. For a little situational awareness on it, there were only 3 members of the committee here voting on the bill, and the sponsor is one of the members of that committee. So it had 2 votes in favor, 1 vote against. There's certainly a possibility, had there been other members of the committee there, that there could have been a different outcome. It is on the Senate board right now. We don't like this bill. This is a bad bill. So reach out to your senators. It is on the bill. Let them know SB 87 needs to go away. We don't want this to get over the House or get any further than it is right now. Feel free to read it, take a look at it. If you need help with talking points, let us know. We're happy to help there, but it's a bad bill. And for the record, pretty much everyone in the state did come and testify against this bill last week, and it got through anyway. So any other quick bills we need to bring up? Otherwise, we have 2 hands over here. Well, We have a hand here and a hand here, not two hands. We've got about 2 minutes.
I would just like to see the league support House Bill 219.
And which one's 219?
Firearms. That states regulate firearms and we don't, federal government doesn't regulate firearms.
Okay.
Can we get a quick update on the sand and gravel tax amendments, SB 75?
Yes, thank you. That was a perfect segue for my last question. Senator Sando wants to meet today to talk about the sand and gravel bill at 5 o'clock. I need 2 or 3 people who want to come talk to Senator Sando with me. If you're interested in coming to talk to Senator Sando with me today at 5 o'clock, he does have a substitute bill. So that's why I didn't have anything specific to talk about on it today. And we're going to go find out what that is later. But if you would like to come talk about sand and gravel at 5 o'clock, I would appreciate a couple of people to come with me. So there's my update. Thank you for that. That was perfect. Yep, we're there. Let me see if I can open this. Carson, can I open the bill tracker just clicking on it? So we do have one motion to ratify. So don't.
We will take one vote on ratifying our positions on the bills, then we'll.
While we're getting the tracker up for you to ratify the positions, if everyone that's here with the league will plan to exit out the back door and to take all of your lunch garbage with you, because of the bill that is going to be heard, you're going to start to have people coming in. So we're going to all exit through the back door. Yes, please grab all your garbage. Okay, we are pulling up the tracker. The tracker is going to show up any minute now. Any minute. Okay. And if you ended up with the sign-in sheet for Friday Facts, if you'll bring that to the front of the room before you leave to one of the league staff. League members, we do need you to stay to ratify the tracker. And of course, we always need a motion to adjourn. I'm not recognize your motion, Mark. I can hear you, but I don't recognize it. Okay, sorry that we cannot get the tracker to pull up. We need a blind faith motion. All right, we have a motion from Mill Creek to support the tracker, and I'll recognize Dan Dugan from Salt Lake as a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? I love your blind faith. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Can I get one of those, please? We have a motion from North Salt Lake to adjourn. We have a second from Cottonwood Heights. We will see you next week.